me? Are you Aaron Burr, sir? That depends. Who's asking? Oh, sure.
Who is that? Me, Shelton?
Michelle, yes.
How on earth did you get on this space shuttle? This is awkward.
What?
I'm on a space shuttle on my way to the moon. And why are you in the shuttle with me?
What in the world are you talking about?
Oh, I left on my virtual reality goggles again. Oh. Welcome to Across the Hall, a podcast sharing ELA strategies from one door away with your hosts, Cade Summers and Michelle Shelton. This is episode 12, Tech Talk. Hey, I'm Cade.
And I'm Michelle.
And it's a teacher's favorite day of school.
The last one.
So while everybody else is just finishing up packing, we are doing the really cool thing, podcasting.
Yeah, we're sitting here with our headphones on, got all of our report cards stuffed into envelopes and mailed off, and it feels good to kind of have a bow tied on the end of that package.
So we had a good year, and right now it feels like we are almost at the point where we were when this podcast got started, which was during the summertime of last year. So the 1 year anniversary is coming very quickly.
That is so unreal that it's almost been a year. That's pretty crazy. This year went by fast if I think about it that way.
So in this episode, Michelle, I feel like I was a missing component for a chunk of it, because here we had lined up a really great interview, and something interrupted me to not be able to participate in that.
Felt like, yeah, you were a very missing component. It was kind of a last minute thing, and we had Kasey Bell, who we'll introduce a little better in just a second, scheduled for a couple months, and so we kind of just had to make do. And to be honest with you, we also were having some serious Wi-Fi issues that day, and so it would be just fitting that on Tech Talk, our technology failed us greatly that day. So in Cade's absence, I asked Lauren Pfeiffer, who is across the hall from me this year, to sit in for him, and he wrote up some questions to ask Kasey, and Lauren kind of stood in for Cade and asked those questions for him, and we're very appreciative to her. We do want to apologize to Kasey, and again, we're about to hear an interview with Kasey Bell, the author and blogger at Shake Up Learning, and a co-host of the podcast that inspired me, at least, us, to get started in podcasting, and that is her podcast, the Google Teacher Tribe podcast with Matt Miller. I'm so excited to have Kasey
I knew
on
you were gonna say
the
that.
show. So excited.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
I'm always so excited.
Yeah, so is Kasey.
Yeah, we're super excited people.
A lot, yeah.
So apologizing to her for all the tech issues, but again, fitting for an episode on technology. And, well.
I wonder if she's for technology or against it.
Huh. She's been very unclear.
Well, maybe the interview will clear that up for you, and I hope you can benefit as much as we have from talking with her. Let's go ahead and get started.
So today on Across the Hall, we have Kasey Bell of Shake Up Learning. It's so great to have you today, Kasey.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I'm always very honored to be on someone else's podcast and not have to be in charge. So,
for those listeners who may not be familiar with you, Kasey, how did you get into podcasting and authoring a book? How do you go from being in the classroom like us to being like, superstar?
I don't think that's the right description, but no, I'll take it. Thank you. The idea of the podcast and even the blog, really, when I started blogging, if you go back and look at my very first blog post, it was called A Perfectionist with Paralysis. And I share that a lot. It's in my book, like the whole story of I was out there training. I'm sharing all these great tools, and I'm like, oh yeah, you should totally be blogging. Every teacher should have their own blog. And then I'd give them this great list of all these amazing blogs that were out there, and I didn't have one to show as a model, and I kind of felt like a fraud. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to suck it up, and I'm going to start doing this, and I'm going to make it happen on a consistent basis. And it just sort of took off from there. Matt and I met at the Google Teacher Academy back in 2014. And so we went through that process together, and we were on similar paths, blogging and stuff like that. And so we had always kind of wanted to work together, and we both wanted to try podcasting. Both had a lot on our plates and really needed to find a way to be pretty efficient about it if we were going to do it. So we decided to do it together, and the podcast was born. And as far as the book is concerned, really, I was at a conference in Texas, not far from where I live, and Dave Burgess was the keynote presenter, blowing everybody away with he's just an amazing presenter. And he came up to me when I was looking at his books. He was doing signings and stuff like that. He had all the books, had expanded. And I knew some of the people out there who had published, Matt was out there, and he was like, so when are we going to see your book on this table? I mean, my jaw about hit the floor. I'm like, y'all, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, you think I could do that? Why would anybody read anything that I would write? And I was extremely humbled by it, but that got the gears turning. I'm like, okay, if he thinks I can do it, maybe there's something out there, and really what I struggled with was, I don't know what to write. And so, as a blogger, I write almost every day anyway. And so, as I started doing a lot of keynotes and stuff like that, so I just started writing everything that I'm doing, every tip, everything, and trying to figure out what I wanted to put together. And really, that's how the book was born.
Our original intent for this podcast was to talk about how to bring technology into the English language arts classroom in a meaningful way. It's spread out a little bit to pretty much any kind of trend that's going around, like how can we use that effectively in our classrooms. But technology is kind of where it started, because in the school where I was before, we really didn't have any technology, but we had a lot of technology professional development. We got a lot of training on technology, and then I would always come out of it saying, I have no idea how to use that in my classroom. So we wanted to have a place to talk about how to use that in our classroom. So we're so excited to have you here, because we have a lot of questions. I'm going to let Lauren get started with talking about technology in the classroom.
Hey, Kasey. So I was actually reading one of Cade's questions and was reflecting on some of my own learning as a teacher. And when I started, I was working with an instructional partner. She was helping me figure out kind of some classroom management stuff and just getting kids engaged and focused. And one of the things that was so frustrating to me was what a distraction the technology is, because we are a one-to-one school. And short of just sitting in the back of the classroom and like have a bird's eye view on everybody's MacBook to make sure they're focused at all times and on task, I didn't really know how to manage that. So her first suggestion was, well, let's just get rid of it for a while. And we did that, and it improved. And so I'm slowly incorporating it back in. I'm just still curious, what warning signs might a teacher notice if the classroom that incorporates technology isn't working for the intended purpose?
So great question. And that's something I think almost every teacher has dealt with. But I also see two sides of it. So there is this world where we have access to too many things that distract us, too much information, too many notifications coming in, everything is hitting us all at once, but that's also the real world. And so in terms of learning how to work, because guess what, when I'm teaching adults, I don't tell them they can't check their email or they can't do something else. So, it's sort of, and that's a different responsibility when you're dealing with adults, I realize, but at the same time, finding something that engages students enough that they don't even want to shut off and go to something else. Now, there always will be those kids that are pushing those boundaries, but I hesitate to be the teacher who's like, lock it down, because I get that question all the time. How do I just lock it down to one tab so they can't do anything else? Well, guess what? When you go into the real world and you get a job, your boss doesn't lock you down to one tab and say, do your job in one tab. So we also have to teach them that how to balance those things and how to have those conversations when they get distracted. Hey, why are you distracted? And how can we bring them back? Sometimes I think it's about building that relationship. Almost everything seems to always come back to building that relationship and knowing what's going on, because sometimes they might be distracted just because they can't focus that day, period. There's something else going on in their life or whatever. But those those types of assignments where the kids don't realize the bell has rung, that, they don't even want to walk out the door. Those are not the things that are going to happen every day. We're not going to have them just, super, sucked into whatever it is that we're doing. So we have to find that balance. I just don't believe that locking everything down and being a monitor of just using Go Guardian every second of every day, because that's mistrusting as well. And so we have to learn how to trust our kids, and they are going to get off task. They're going to do that with pencil and paper. They're going to get off task. They just don't have as many cool things to distract them. I don't think there is any kind of magic answer, unfortunately, but I do think that's part of living in the 21st century.
Whenever I was in a school that didn't have the one-to-one, they were sneaking on their cell phones, they were passing notes, all the things that you said. There was still distraction. I had just as many students not turning in work. The students will also try to blame it on that this Mac looks too distracting. I can't pay attention. Because I was asking a few actually right before I came in here about technology and just, what they feel like is good about it and what's bad. And they all said, whenever I said bad, they said, oh, well, some people don't do their work because they start playing games instead, or they start doing this. So that's a good point that you made about teaching them how to live in the world.
Well, those conversations, because that's something I suffer from too, is multitasking is not purposeful, and to let them, hey, you feel like you're doing these two things at once, but you're not doing either one of them well. Right. And to help them kind of see that, I also use the Pomodoro technique a lot too. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but there's different versions of it. But basically, it's when you're doing deep work, something that requires some concentration and critical thinking, and you do it for say 30 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. And then you go 30 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. Well, if they need to like tune out, because sometimes, especially if you're really critically thinking and working hard in something, your brain needs to kind of breathe. And I find that when I do that, because I create tons of content and it really drains me very quickly, and I'll catch myself in the same position, hunched over at the computer for 3 hours, and then I can't hardly move. Mm-hmm. But if I get up, move around, that stimulates my body, stimulates my brain, and then it also sort of helps balance that out. So that's also, and you don't have to do 5 minutes. I mean, you could do a 2-minute, and that might help kids sort of separate where they are between focusing on the school work, the learning, versus some of the distractions.
I mean, you talked about coming up with lessons that are so engaging that they won't want to be distracted and play games and things like that. What are some of the lessons or the tools that you have come across in talking to everybody and all the different research that you've done that has really been effective?
Well, I can tell you that the post that went up this week was the HyperDoc unit from a whole team of people: Sean Fahey, Carly Mora, Heather Marshall, Michelle Wagner, and Becky. I can't say her last name, so I'm sorry. But anyway, I just wanted to give them credit because I didn't do it, but they contributed that lesson to the book. And then I did a blog post on it this week, and everybody went crazy for it, because not only was it a HyperDoc, it was an entire unit, and it was specifically for the Wild Robot and the Global Read Aloud project. Mm-hmm. But what I loved about it is I felt like any teacher at any grade level could look at this and get some ideas, because what they did was they had pre-assessment in there with engaging questions, coming back to using tools like Flipgrid and Padlet. And so it was really building all kinds of things together. And they had vocabulary activities. They learned how to do book snaps and put those in there. And so it also had extensions into STEM because of obviously the robot in the book. And they really just sort of built it into this extremely engaging and interactive unit. But, like I said, when I sent it out, I told my readers, I'm like, I promise you, please do not think, oh, this is language arts and it's never going to apply to me, because you could easily turn and use those things. So I am a big fan of Flipgrid. I think Flipgrid has really shifted the way that we can use video in the classroom. I think it's an amazing tool for reflection, and kids, for the most part, love video. And, that there's so many different ways that we can engage them, because guess what? If they're recording a video, they're not playing a game or something else at the same time, like they would be if they were just typing up a paper in a Google Doc. So it's sort of thinking of those types of things that, like I said, that can engage them in new ways. And I also am really on a mission almost to help teachers and students see the power of publishing for a global audience, making things public and for an intentional audience. So I think that changes how much they care about their work, because when I had my kids publish their writing on a website and they saw it, and it suddenly, Miss Bell, can I change this? I didn't know anybody was going to read it besides you. Like, I'm hurt, right? But as soon as they know that their audience is expanded, that also adds new value to what they're creating. And so if they're invested in it in that way, I think they're also going to be more engaged, and of course getting them creating and things like that. But no, I mean, the HyperDoc unit itself, HyperDocs in general, especially if you're moving beyond just putting a link in a doc, just like every initiative in education, I've also seen the watered down versions of things. So, but one of the big proponents in my book is talking about dynamic learning. And really that's just my way of defining all of these things that we want in the classroom, to move beyond the traditional bounds of what we have going on in our classes. And whether that's, just taking those tiny steps of beginning to integrate technology, but going beyond what we thought was possible, beyond the walls of the classroom, beyond what the tool can do, and those types of things too.
So this question just came to my mind as I was listening to you talk, because I know so many teachers are still getting students to create PowerPoint type things. So what are some more effective, more engaging ways of creating presentations?
Presenting to a class, I mean, there's so many different ways to present information. I think video is a really easy one now. It used to take so much time to try to do anything with video in the classroom. And now, especially with the tools they have in their pockets, instead of texting their friends, hey, get those phones out, we're gonna create something. But, video, and there's lots of other ways to present it, and it doesn't even have to use technology. Using those performance tasks and being able to speak in front of other students is still something that is a standard across the board that we need to encourage. So, but they can practice that, and if they put that in a video, they can see themselves and get some more feedback. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. And if we're talking about giving them a public audience and a way to present, of course, that presentation in a video alone could also take many forms, because that could be their face on the screen. That could be a screencast video. That could be animation that they've created. They could be creating, like a cartoon or claymation, or especially now with the maker movement and all of these things that are not necessarily digital on a screen, can be, presented and shown, and how critical it is to show the learning process, to show where you started and not just that end piece, which is what we tend to get when we present in front of the classroom. So whether that's taking pictures and uploading it into Google Photos and creating some sort of album of the entire learning journey, adding those reflections. It could be, text, annotating on top of images. Any type of digital tool that we use now can be presented in some way.
While you were discussing that, it made me think of something that you said, even in your little promo thing for your book, and that is just making sure the technology is about the learning target. And, learning targets have been a huge focus for us. We're talking about learning targets all the time. And sometimes I feel like I myself hit that spot on, and I've done a great job of making sure the technology is being effective at helping them to meet the learning target, and then other times not so much. So how can you make sure that your technology is meaningful for the learning that you're trying to achieve, and you're not just throwing it in there to say, hey, I teched that up at
I think that piece comes down to purposeful planning. And as I told you earlier in my confessions of a bad teacher sort of thing, but I was the teacher who was willing to try anything. I was the the tech savvy teacher, the one who's like, oh yeah, that's cool. We're going to do that tomorrow. And I just like throw it out there. And sometimes it was awesome. And sometimes I'm like, well, okay, that was fun, but what did they learn, But that's the nature of being the risk taker or somebody who just loves technology. But, when it comes down to it, I really think you always come back to planning. What is it that you're teaching? What are your learning goals, your learning targets? What are the standards you're trying to meet? And then you pick the tools from your little toolbox that are going to help get you there. So when I moved to a coaching position, I would have teachers come to me all the time. I'd show them some sort of new tool and they're like, oh, that's so awesome. Okay, so tell me how to use Padlet in my classroom. I'm like, okay, what are you teaching right now? Like I always had to come back and flip it. They wanted some like, okay, just have them post their answers on there. No, you can't make it that simple. And so you also have to be really careful, I think as a trainer or a staff developer that you're also sort of implementing those types of strategies and thinking about that ahead of time. But, there are still lots of teachers that are at the substitution level. And I think that's okay for a lot of things. We can slowly make those pushes, but everybody's not going to be at this like super innovative level. It's with everything in every lesson. And that's why I talk a lot about balance in terms of looking at what's going on in your classroom on a day-to-day basis. I want teachers to think about, okay, well, this had some creativity. This had a little bit of communication skills. We're covering a little bit of the 4 C's, not all of them, because guess what? We're not going to cover all of them in everything that we do. Oh yeah, we went beyond. We did some connecting with the outside world. We did a Google Hangout with another classroom. Just those tiny little steps, because I think that's what is so overwhelming for a lot of teachers. And I feel like I spend my time with the choir, like with you, like everybody's like, oh yeah, I love this stuff, but everybody else is not there. And so trying to find a way to make it meaningful and help teachers see how to connect the dots and how to use the tools and make it meaningful. Because if you can't connect the dot back to your learning target, you need to start over. Don't do that lesson. Use that somewhere else. So there's going to be somewhere else that you can figure it out.
Lauren and I both had basically a catastrophe with some green screens. That did not go well. We had different assignments going on in our classes, and both of us are saying this is not going the way that we had planned.
Yeah, I think I just was so excited to use all of the cool new tech tools here that I think it was a second unit. So like a month into school, I was like, okay, we're going to make green screen movies now. Go. And it was bad. It was bad enough to where I just kind of chunked the whole unit and we started over and we did not do green screens.
So we did the thing you said about getting so excited and just say, oh yeah, I'm going to use that. That's exactly what we did. And it did not go well.
So, well, can I ask though, where it fell apart?
Planning.
I mean, did the kids need like more help in learning how to do it themselves?
Mine, it was a combination of I thought I knew how to do it, and then when it came time to execute it, I was lacking, and then they didn't know how to do it, and I, because they've all used these MacBooks and tools for so long, I just assumed that they would be more tech savvy about it, and they could fill in the gray areas, and they couldn't. So that was a failure too. And then
in mine, it was structure. I didn't give them enough structure because I wanted them to own it, and they weren't ready. They were not ready to own it. I needed to scaffold that a little bit better, and I didn't really give them enough structure with the assignment itself.
One of the tech tools that I've been wanting to use since the beginning of the year is the virtual reality. And I saw that on your webpage, and I even bought my girls for Christmas some virtual reality glasses to play with them and see what we could do. And the Google virtual reality is hard for me to understand even how to work it. I don't understand even where to download apps or where to look for like historical content to use. And what would be your advice to just like a starting point for first time users?
So, well, first time users, you may not even want to go too deep. I mean, you may just want to search, the App Store for some basic VR, let kids get exposure to it, play that playtime thing, and let them get that out of their system, because it's sort of like the tapping the pencil is what I used to associate it with. The kids that have to tap the pencil, let them get it out of their system for a little while, and then we come down and we do the serious stuff, and then move on into like expeditions. Did you look at expeditions at all?
I've tried, but I have not found the site to be really user friendly, and I don't know if it's just because I'm not familiar with it, or if it because I have an app or an Apple phone, or I don't know. I think I need some guidance, and or somebody knows what they're doing.
It's not perfect by any means, but they do have a spreadsheet of every expedition that's out there, so you can find something for just about any application. I can tell you that, again, that's something that's mostly been piloted. Like schools will have a pilot, and then they'll have like one set that kind of floats around. That's definitely not something you're going to do on a daily basis by any means, but it does require a lot of setup. It helps to have your own Wi-Fi connection in the room that's separate from your regular one. So you might have interference from your own school's Wi-Fi that could be causing issues. They don't, then you have problems when the other devices don't connect to the teacher, because the teacher is supposed to be able to lead. They just had an update too, where anybody is supposed to be able to lead an expedition now. But, it might just be going into Street View in Google Earth or on YouTube and finding those virtual reality videos, and just letting kids just experience something in virtual reality. Maybe not trying to jump into the full tour, but to work up to it, because you may be having some of those connection issues and things like that. It's not as it's not the thing you do in class tomorrow, for sure. You need some preparation and some training to be able to do it well.
One of the questions that Cade wanted to make sure that we asked was, we have student-led conferences, and at the moment they are doing those through Google Slides. And so we're working on using Google Sites next year instead. When it comes to digital portfolios, what would you recommend for that?
So that's a common question too. And I do like Google Sites, mostly because of the way it works with other Google tools, that it's just pretty seamless. And if you're already using Google, it is pretty easy to bring in all those pieces together. But there's also a lot of schools doing different things with Seesaw. There are lots of different website types of creators, but I honestly have never seen a tool that was designed for e-portfolios that was really good. There's some people who've tried it, but I think that's the nature of the beast, that when we want to use all of our favorite things and then make some magical tool that brings it all together, nobody's going to be able to work with everything. And so I think that's why I lean more towards Google Sites, although New Sites is still missing a lot of great things, like being able to give them templates would be an awesome piece for e-portfolios, which is what we used to do in the old sites. And also being able to use little scripts and things to make the sites for the kids and have them all managed. So I think it's still a little bit cumbersome, but I think it also depends on what you want to put in those, what's going in there. Is that like a showcase portfolio?
It's where they would collect kind of evidence, artifacts of their learning. Is that the best place to do that? Because they can just copy it.
It is a good place. I don't know the best place. I think is what I don't know that there is a best, because you're going to find everybody has a different opinion, but there, especially because mobile tends to have some different issues. But are y'all on Chromebooks?
We have
MacBooks.
Yes.
So yeah, I would lean towards Google Sites, and you may even want to take a look at just some different website creators too.
So I mentioned you being an author, which means you have a book, and you have a book that came out this past month, correct?
I do. So, my book came out on April 4th. It's called Shake Up Learning: Practical Ideas to Move Learning from static to dynamic. And so a big focus of that book is that idea of dynamic learning and how we can help make that shift, even in small increments. But I'm sort of defining just all of those ideas that we want to see in the classroom. It's broken into 3 parts. So the first part is the why, sort of the behind the scenes, like, technology is changing so fast. How do we keep up? All of the things that have sort of put us where we are today in 2018. Part 2 is the DNA of dynamic learning, all of the things that we want to affect in the classroom to change and to make more dynamic. And then part 3 is that other part I was talking about earlier, planning. So it's really about how to get it done, how to plan. There's lesson planning templates. There are examples of lessons. I also have a lesson plan database that I'm building on the book website, which is shakeuplearningbook.com. And so if you go to get lessons, it's still very small right now, but it is growing. So the lessons from the book and a few others have been added over the last few weeks, but I'm hoping to create a place where teachers can find and share lessons, because I get that question all the time. Hey, is Google going to make this for us? I wish Google would make it for us, because this one is not perfect, but it is searchable. Filter, and you can search and look at what ISTE standards it meets and what of the dynamic learning pieces it meets as well. But really what I'm telling people, the book is not about technology. The tagline for the book is technology is not a solution, but an opportunity. And that opportunity that it presents is for us to do things that are more dynamic in the classroom and to really help us find ways to shake up learning, because that's really what my mission and everything that I do is all about.
I'm going to end with a question from Cade. He said, one of the greatest resources it seems you and Matt rely on is your audience. You get messages, emails, and comments all the time of creative new ways to use some already existing tech tool. Could you give a creative or unique use of a tool our audience likely is already using that they could immediately try without having to learn a new tool or app?
So one of my favorite tools for anything really that I find myself referring teachers to all the time is Google Slides. That I call that the Swiss Army knife of the G Suite tools, because there is so much you can do with it. And there's actually an episode of the Google Teacher Tribe all about this, called Google Slides Can Do What, because Matt and I end up talking about it all the time. But it is not just a replacement for PowerPoint. It is not just creating a slide presentation, but for one, you can easily create an ebook in Google Slides, and you can keep the slides the regular size, but a lot of people don't realize that you can go to File, Page Setup, hit the drop down and go to custom size, and you can make those slides any size you want in the world, which means you can make it 8.5 by 11 inches, which is the size of a piece of paper. And so once you realize that just really changes the game on how you see the possibilities of using something like Google Slides. So if you want to make something that looks like a book and possibly even print it out, that you could make that 8.5 by 11. And then the fact that you can download as. So if you go to File, Download As, you can download it as a PDF, which is the most universally accepted file format in the world. So that means that can go on a website, and grandma in Nebraska can read it, or wherever. And so that idea of kids publishing, of course, you can keep it in slides, embed it in slides as well, but you can do stop motion in Google Slides. I mean, if you really, and it's not as complicated as you think it is. Now, if you really want to get fancy and do like claymation and take pictures and move your little objects or your Legos and create a story, you can do that and upload that into Slides. And then when you go to File, Publish to the web, have it change slides every second, and whatever you did is going to look like it's moving. And so I think there's a lot of little things that people don't realize that are all just in how you see those tools being used. Now, of course, you can create all kinds of images in slides. For me, slides is so much more versatile than trying to create in docs. I find myself creating a lot of things, but docs is just a little rigid. And the fact that a slide deck can also become a class set of something, right? Every kid can have a slide to create something. So it becomes much easier to do collaboration and things like that and have it all in one place. So that's one of my go-to tools. Of course, y'all know that I'm pretty partial to Google tools, but that is one, and that's why.
Well, I actually heard you on the podcast talk about changing the page size, and that did change my life. That totally changed my life. And I use Google Slides for pretty much everything that I do.
Yeah,
I agree with you about the stop motion thing. That sounds really cool. I've never tried that before.
Have you? Oh yeah, you need to go look that one up too. So I've also started doing a presentation about this. I'll tell you this inside story here. So I submitted the proposal, and it was supposed to be 10 things you didn't know Google Slides can do. So by the time it was accepted as the title. By the time I actually finished the presentation, it was 26 plus things you didn't know Google Slides could do. And I can still add more, so the list just keeps growing. And I had to create a table of contents at the beginning, which, creating interactive slides by linking slide to slide is something a lot of people don't know that you can do. And you can create choose your own adventure stories that way too, so that students could click on a slide, read a story, make a decision, and it doesn't have to move in chronological order. It can skip and take them to a slide with another piece of information.
Yeah, that is so cool. I do. I love Google. I love all the Google apps. I use Google Classroom a lot of the time. And it's my go-to as well. So that's why I love listening to the Google Teacher Tribe podcast. So thank you so much for being here with us today. And I'm so sorry that Cade couldn't be, but that means you got to meet the lovely Lauren Pfeiffer.
Yes, it was fun.
And we appreciate you so much being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, the irony, Michelle Shelton. Hey, what you guys don't know is that this is the second time we've tried to record this, and Michelle, how well did you say that interview went when you were interviewing Kasey Bell?
Not well at all. Because technology it's almost like it knows. It knows that this whole episode's supposed to be about technology, and that all of you out there, or some of you out there, are scared of using technology for this reason. But we are plowing through because it is worth it.
Our school is invested in this really cool soundboard with a couple of really awesome microphones, and I use Audacity, which is an excellent platform to be able to record your podcasts and other types of audio recorded content. And it just totally stopped about 15 seconds into probably was about a 5-minute dialogue between me and you.
So we said all kind of great things that you'll never hear.
Yeah, but we might imply some of those things and expect you guys to know what in the world we're talking about, assuming that we have now forgotten what was on that. And anyway, so Michelle, we were just talking about how tech fails us sometimes, and really, just as it did with us in trying to record this, in your classroom, you've had tech fail. In mine, the problem has been, what we're working on in this segment. We want to talk about tech tools that you can integrate, many of which actually Kasey mentioned in the interview, some of which we're actually kind of including into this segment, but tech tools that you can integrate with purpose.
Right. What a quote that I pulled out of what Kasey said was, if you can't connect the dot back to your learning target, you need to start over. And a lot of times whenever we are using technology in the classroom, we are doing that either because we are being told that we need to use technology in the classroom, or because we're so excited about some kind of new technology that we found that we just jump right in. And a lot of times we don't take the time to make sure that the learning is happening, or we don't do the preparation. And we talked about that a little bit in the interview, that preparing ahead of time is so important, and making sure that you're using technology effectively and for a true purpose of learning, and not just for the bells and whistles of it.
Yeah, have you seen the quote, and I'd butcher it right now, but it's something along the lines of what makes a great teacher, and it has to do with like great teachers who can tech or something like that versus great techers who teach or something along those lines.
No, I haven't heard that, but
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, so I totally butchered it, but we don't want to be the kinds of teachers that just use tech for tech's sake. We want to be quality teachers who intentionally utilize technology for heightening expectations and the skills of our students. So we want to make it useful and practical. With that said, there was a time in my first year teaching that I tried to use a whiteboard device that actually allowed me to annotate on the screen through my iPad, which was displaying the digital textbook. And I was trying to annotate the digital textbook, modeling it for students up on the board, thinking they're going to really get a lot out of this. But I had so much trouble trying to make it work that I just kept on trudging through the tech problems, and about 45 minutes later realized, my kids didn't get anything out of it. I destroyed all of the class time that could have been used for something useful, and anyway, it was such a depressing day, and I think I've had multiple days just like that.
That was that tech ego that you got that made that happen, right?
Pride, yeah. You think I could just stop 10 seconds into the problem, but no. I'm going to go 10 seconds more because I'm going to solve this problem. And after 2 minutes, I'm still going to get this. Students, stop talking. Let me handle this. And then 10 students end up trying to help you get it, which they have no idea at all. Sometimes they do, but they have no idea in this instance how to fix it, and they think they do, and it ends up just being a down spiral of all of time that you can never take back.
Well, I will make you feel a little bit better about yourself. I have a document camera in my room that I have not been able to get to work all year. I've held my face in all different directions. I've plugged and unplugged and turned off and turned on and done everything I can. And Cade had to come borrow my room one day and got it to work right off the bat. And then as soon as he left, it won't work again. So he obviously has some kind of technology magic that I do not have.
I'm the technology charmer.
Is that what it is?
That's it.
Is that what it is? Okay. Well, Kasey gave you a lot of wonderful ideas for how you can use technology effectively in the classroom. And we have 9 standards-based tech tools that we are going to share with you today and talk about what standards that those could help you to master or help your students to master.
So the first tech tool that we're going to use, some of you have probably heard of it and used it, is Google Classroom.
Google Classroom. And what I am going to tell you is that if you have not used Google Classroom, you need to go right now and set one up, because Google Classroom is going to be a way for you to streamline everything you're doing anyway. It is so easy to use. It is easy to use for the kids. There is an app for it that I've used on my phone to grade papers whenever I didn't have my MacBook with me. It is just such a wonderful tool that you can use pretty much everything else that we're going to talk about with Google Classroom. The standard spotlight that I have here is that basically you can all the standards you can use with Google Classroom, but the learning target that I am spotlighting on our blog as well, you can go and check that out, is I can create an engaging multimedia presentation in collaboration with a group in order to present our ideas for our How Might We project to our classmates. And the reason that I put that as the learning target for that is because in Google Classroom, you can assign a document to each individual student so that they all have their own copy, but you can also have them create a Google Doc and collaborate on one and then turn that in. So there are different ways that you can assign things in Google Classroom so that they can work together, they can work separately. It's just such an easy way to assign documents, especially if you're assigning an essay, or if you have something that you need them to type on. All of them can get a copy of that without them having to go and hit make a copy and go through all of that. Another thing with Google Classroom is that it integrates with so many other sites and apps, and so that you can import your rosters. Kasey has a list, and I have a link provided for you on our blog of 50 awesome apps that integrate with Google Classroom. But 3 that I found that I use that were not on her list are Common Lit, that we've had episodes on before, ClassFlow, which I actually learned about from the Ron Clark Academy when I visited there last week, and Storyboard That. All of those will allow you to import your rosters from Google Classroom, and then you don't have to reset up those classes every time that you use them.
And I've got to do so much more with my Google Classroom. I know I'm just getting like the tip of the iceberg, but because I don't grade in Google Classroom. Right now, I only post some assignments in Google Classroom because we have a different LMS that we use in our school system. So it's purely optional for teachers to utilize Google Classroom in their classrooms. But one very basic thing that I like about it, like you said, it's automatic file sharing. And so when they click the assignment, which they have been given, it automatically duplicates it in their name. And surely that's accessible in Google Classroom, but that's not where I access it. I actually access them by going to my Google Drive, and as I'm going down and grading people's work, I actually type in their name in my Google Drive, where I type in the students' email addresses, which we have through our school system. It's at oxfordcityschoolsonline.com, and it just automatically brings up their work that's inside of Google Classroom or that they downloaded there. So it's just so quick to access, in my opinion, and there's probably a faster way than that too, but it's so quick to access and tremendously useful, really for that reason.
I will tell you, there is one thing about Google Classroom. Google, if you're listening, I'm sure you're not, but just in case, is I would like to be able to create units in Google Classroom so that I don't just have this long list of all the assignments and they have to go down to find one. So I do have that suggestion that I should be able to have folders of assignments to create like a unit. But that is my only suggestion for Google Classroom. Google Classroom has been a lifesaver and has saved me so much time and helped me to organize myself in my classroom.
Is Google listening? Are you kidding me?
Google is not listening.
Google's always listening. My phone's sitting right here right now, and I guarantee you Google's listening.
Google's listening.
You better be careful because Google's listening. So my first tool that I want to discuss is one I've mentioned when we reviewed digital annotation tools on a previous episode. Check that one out. But my tool is Kami. Kami, Kami, is an awesome tool. At the end of the school year, some of my students, in a grumpy, somewhat tongue-in-cheek tone, said, all we did this year was annotate. And, of course, we didn't do anything else. That's all my students did. No reading, no writing, no class discussions, no technology, no games, no fun. And so Kami, of course, ruined that for everyone because it's a digital annotation tool. Guess what we're going to do today, kids? Annotate. But it was actually a different way for my students to do some really strong academic things. And that includes, of course, annotation tools, taking notes, writing comments, highlighting key phrases, whether you're making them look for imagery or strong diction, positive or negative, or certain details, facts, opinions, whatever it is that you're trying to get your students anywhere between K through 12 to do. And it's got shape tools, highlighters, different colors, all of those types of things. But in terms of using it for an academic English-centric purpose, there's even audio annotation tools that are accessible through certain versions of the Kami program, where, if you're trying to get an ELL student or ESL student to work on pronunciation, you could assess it through audio annotation tools where next to a text, you're having them pronounce certain words on that PDF. I should have said Kami works with PDF documents. You could do work on fluency, where students read an entire paragraph or a section within a certain time frame, and you can listen to their pronunciations of words and see how quickly they're able to read a passage, with what emphasis they can read certain phrases that are strung together that comprise those sentences. Commentary, even dramatization. I hope for this episode in the notes, the show notes, I can give you some of what we did with the tragedy of Julius Caesar. We had the No Fear Shakespeare version alongside the old Shakespearean language or English, and I had some of my students recreate using audio the soothsayers, beware the Ides of March. And that was a really fun thing. So even dramatization, how might this sound on a stage or in a television set? You could have them input thematic sound effects. And by that I mean, if you're having them analyze theme, let them find a sound clip on freesound.org or Sound Bible or freemusicarchive.org. And that sound clip or that sound effect that they choose could somehow represent a thematic element of a particular part of the text, such as ignorance or human fallibility or curiosity or innovation or something like that. And Kami also has video annotation. So if you're like going for that dramatization side of things, maybe have some students act it out. I would think even theater teachers out there, as they're looking to digital versions of a script, could begin to have their kids at home video annotating certain parts to demonstrate their ability to, connect with an audience. So I love Kami for all those reasons.
Dramatization is that how you say that word?
Dramatization.
Dramatization's how
I feel like you're making fun of me again.
I
And
am making fun
I
of
might
you.
not have been there for that interview, but I heard you're making fun of my wordiness.
Dramatization. Is that how you say it?
I don't know. Dramatization.
Dramatization.
It's probably drama, and I use the word drama. I don't say drama.
Well, you said dramatization like 5 times, so I was I started to really fixate. But anyway,
I'm going to get Google to pronounce it because Google's watching.
Oh, and Cade.
Hey Google, if you're watching, how do you pronounce that? And I'm sorry for butchering the.
Cade is a Kami hero. In case I haven't mentioned that before, his face is on the website and everything. Kami hero, Cade Summers.
Thank you.
So the next tool that we have to share with you is Book Snaps. That is something that Kasey mentioned briefly in the interview, and something that I see all over Twitter. Tara Martin is the creator of Book Snaps. And I have often thought, how can I use Book Snaps in my classroom in a way that's meaningful and not just for fun? So it occurred to me the other day that I have had such a hard time getting my students to choose to choose quality
Dramatization.
Anyway, to choose quality evidence. They tend to just find the first quote they see that might somehow have something to do with what they're talking about, or the shortest quote, or they will go to Google. Do you know this, Cade, that they will go to Google and type quotes from To Kill a Mockingbird?
I had no idea that my students do that every time that I ask them to get a quality quote.
I mean, wow. So, and I'll tell them whenever they're giving me these I had a student one time who quoted the word yes. That was their quote. That was their textual evidence. Yes. And it wasn't like some big intense yes leading, that was pivotal to the plot or anything. No. It's just yes. That's what was their quote. So I will tell my students, if you would not find this on Pinterest in some pretty little font, or have it as like your Instagram caption or something, it is not good enough. Like, you need to make sure that if you are using it as textual evidence, that you are bringing in another analogy I give them is the murder weapon. I want the murder weapon. I don't want you to tell me that, they saw them arguing in the parking lot. That's not good enough. I want the murder weapon with their DNA on it. I want good textual evidence. And so Book Snaps would be a way to at least make them go and open up the book. There you go. Don't Google it. Go open up the book and find a quote that you think is worthy of creating this Book Snap image, and then snap it out.
Yes. And on top of that, a lot of them, if you just go to hashtag Book Snaps now, you'll see a lot of folks actually incorporating different pictures into the same book snap, different pictures, maybe a picture of the book that they're reading with the specific annotation or the marking in their book of the quote. Then they'll put some animated characters over it, which is done, I think, with Bitmoji apps and that kind of thing. A lot of people would put Bitmojis on top of it, and then sometimes they'll even maybe use like a Google slide to help create their book snap, and on that Google slide they'll have those features and put like a theme statement or put some kind of a summary of what's said in that passage or on that page, or give a context or whatever. So it's kind of neat the ways that you can build all these different elements together to make it a quality book snap, as opposed to just using tech for tech's sake.
Right. And I probably should have explained what a book snap is for those of you who've never heard of that. Snap comes from Snapchat, and those Bitmoji, am I saying that right? Or the little cartoon people you make of yourself. Cade and I have those. That was really fun to make, by the way.
So snap from Snapchat.
Snap from Snapchat. Book from the book.
Books.
So basically people take a picture of the book page of the book, and then they will in some way highlight something from that page, some quote from that page, and then they use animations, clip art, or whatever, text to add to that to kind of create a visual of something on that page that's meaningful. And then, supposedly, and to snap that out on Snapchat, but you can use that anywhere. You can put that on Twitter. You can just, put it into your Google Doc. You can put it anywhere because it's an image. So, but in order to use that meaningfully, you need to really make sure that you're focused on the quality of that textual evidence. And like Kate said, maybe even have a different requirement that they add some commentary in there somewhere.
All right, so the next one that is tool that I want to present to you is virtual reality. This is something I've never done in my classroom, and probably very few English teachers are utilizing this in their classroom. One, because you don't have the technology in your classroom, and two, you wonder, well, this is something more probably fitting for a theater class or for a TV production class or graphic arts or visual arts, not for English. But I would suggest to you guys that there are some ways to explore virtual reality in your classroom, and some of those really hinge around, and this won't be a very long portion of this segment, but a lot of those hinge around maybe like writing narratives to develop real or imagined experiences. That's one of our writing standards in Common Core. It also mentions in that standard using effective technique, well-chosen details, and well-structured event sequences. So you say, well, how in the world can I integrate that standard using virtual reality? If you go to YouTube or just search in Google YouTube 360 videos, you will come across a plethora. I don't like using that word. I just use that word.
I like the word plethora.
Yeah, I know, but it
cornucopia.
Yeah, it makes you sound like you're trying to be smart. I'm trying not to be smart here, but I'm also not trying to be stupid. So
you are victorious.
Anyway.
I'm kidding.
So this is new to me, but you can YouTube 360 videos, and like right now in front of me, I got a Minecraft 360 video. It's a video roller coaster. There's also 360 regular roller coasters. There's 360 space animations. There's 360 battlefield animations, and some of these are animated, some of these are real video footage, but no matter your content area, English, history, science, you're going to realize that there are 360 videos for analyzing like cells or circulatory systems and all kinds of different things where you could like imagine yourself in that situation. Now, from a writer's standpoint, we all know that it's best to feel things out, to visualize, to use sound devices and imagery vividly. That basically, when we want kids to write, we want them to write with as much descriptiveness as possible. So seeing things firsthand in, that you would normally not be able to see firsthand because you're in a school setting is a great opportunity for students. And that 360 virtual reality ability is pretty cool.
Or because you were terrified of roller coasters. We were watching, as we were just looking through and doing some research for this episode, he pulled up a 360 roller coaster, and those things are legit. We didn't even have on the virtual reality headset, and I was getting motion sick.
And all kinds of words come to mind when you start to see things like that. You go through experiences in your mind of when you have done those things before, if you have past experiences with those, or feelings that you would have if you were in those shoes.
Nauseated.
And you can't make that stuff up sometimes. It's hard for students and yourself. It's hard to do that without some kind of visual cue. And so really neat to the storytelling aspect is the fact that, virtual reality headsets can help make that happen. And I know that those headsets often look like around, the $300 mark. So you're looking mid 200s, $300 plus to be able to get one of those for your classroom.
The next tool that we're going to talk about is blogging. I specifically use EduBlogs, and I know Cade does as well because he's the one that got me started on the EduBlogs. But blogging has been very transformational in my classroom this year. And I do credit Cade because he is the one who got me started with it last year. And this year I really integrated it into my classroom all year long. And my students have even talked about how much better they feel their writing has gotten because they have been freed up to write a little less formally. They like having some freedom to decide how long their paragraphs are. They like that other people get to read it and that they have that public audience. Kasey talks about the power of publishing for a global audience and how much better can you be than blogging and putting it out there for all of the internet to see? So I have just used blogging as reflections of things that we've read. They've had to blog about being leaders of their own learning. They've blogged about, memories, so personal narratives. We've blogged about a reflection about a field trip. We've blogged about so many different things. They even created their Fortnite article on their blog so that they could keep up with that. I've encouraged them just to continue with the website that they've created throughout the rest of high school so that they can look back on it kind of as a writing portfolio. Some of the feedback that I've gotten from students is, and I'm just going to read a couple of things, is I have really improved my blogging, knowing it should be lengthy, giving the audience something to remember. At the very beginning, we really struggled with getting students to write any kind of length. I was getting these little tiny choppy paragraphs. And so we used this make writing strategy and had them really build, and I'm saying we as if I'm more than one person. Anyway, so I had them really build their blog and decide what their headings would be and what pictures they would use. And so they've gotten so much better over the year. I've been so impressed with how much better they look, with how much better they sound, with the voice that a lot of my students have found for themselves. And some of my students who I wouldn't typically think of as being wonderful essay writers have become really good bloggers. And so it's been a really great experience and something I'm definitely going to do again next year because I really feel like it was beneficial to my students.
Yeah, I love blogging, and my students also like it. It brings out some of their best writing abilities when they know that they're going to have an authentic audience that their work is presented to. The next one that I want to present is green screens. Now, this has been kind of a happening trend lately. I remember last year when we interviewed Joey Tarleson from Flipgrid that we talked a lot about green screens. And at that point, and even to date, I still have not used a green screen in my classroom, but Michelle has. And
well, in the interview, we did talk about my disaster with using green screens.
Yeah,
so.
But it doesn't have to be a disaster.
It does
not. So thinking about some general practical uses in ELA, number one, I begin to think just a presentation. My students just did a cool video the other day, and it's at my hashtag S'more English 57. That was my 5th through 7th period, S'more English 57. It was a Fortnite video, and they're like battling it out in the hallway. But you guys, I know it because I've seen your videos on the internet and on YouTube. How many student-issued videos have you had your students create or you have seen where there's always lockers in the background, where there's classroom desks in the background, other students picking their noses in the background, and sometimes poor audio and poor visual things that otherwise could easily be enhanced with a green screen? We don't think that through very often, but I know my students the other day, the work which they did could have been even better had it not had all of those background elements and could have been infused with some pretty cool background of like a battlefield or something.
I was so impressed with what his students were able to do. And they did it in 2 days?
Yes.
It was so funny. And I know you might not have been thinking funny when you heard Fortnite, but it was funny, but also just fitting for the Julius Caesar Fortnite mix that you did. I was so impressed with what they did.
And to some extent it was professional, except for the background were lockers and a hallway. So thinking about that, we want students to learn professionalism. And as our students get more creative, we don't want them to be creative and professional-esque except for in a classroom setting or a hallway setting. We want them to go all the way. And some of you guys as teachers are already doing this. But the all the way part would be, make it a real battlefield scene in the background or other type of fitting scenery surrounding whatever it is that a student is presenting. Plus, it gives more credibility in what they are presenting. If it's a serious subject, for example, as opposed to a playful narrative which they're trying to recreate or to create. If it's a serious thing, I was just thinking, if students, maybe I have them maybe I give different groups or different students the opportunity to teach the class something. Maybe one day they teach apostrophe use. Another student teaches some other grammatical, like a semicolon use, and I have them present that instead of me, just for the sake of learning presentation skills, as well as students being able to better learn from peer teachers. that could be easily put online on YouTube in a class channel with professional background instead of like a classroom setting. And so it would be kind of cool with a green screen with some kind of a classroom motif or a created thing that says, Mr. Summers' English class or whatever creative title they want to give it that's outside of even like a school context, sound.
And when Cade and I were talking about ideas for green screens the other day, I said it would. One of the things that I really focused on standards-wise was audience and purpose this year.
I like this, yeah.
Like trying to get them to understand that you have to change up the way that you speak, the way that you write, depending on who your audience is and your purpose. So I thought it would be really funny and yet also maybe get the point across if we were to have them give a speech in front of a green screen and then change up the audience and talk about why this audience of elderly people, senior citizens, would definitely take their speech differently than this audience of kindergarten students, or this audience of like the United Nations would be. Why would that speech be appropriate for that audience and that purpose? And that could be both funny and also hopefully get the point across. That the audience is very important to consider whenever you are writing or creating anything.
Yes, that's really good. So I think of maybe an Antony speech or a Brutus speech in the Tragedy of Julius Caesar, or maybe the Gettysburg Address or something like that, presented in a context on a green screen with some strange rhetorical background that doesn't seem to fit, and students analyze that. I think those ideas that you just said are outstanding, and I think it'd be a lot of fun as opposed to just learning about it. It's a lot of fun for kids to see that. You ever seen Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah.
And the green screen that they wouldn't know what's behind them.
Yeah.
The what's behind them, and they would have to react the way the audience reacted. Like if it's a poisonous spider, and they're like, ah!
I forgot all about that. That could be hilarious.
And he's like, oh, whoa, look at that. And the audience is feeding off of the audience's reaction. The speaker has to, gauge what he or she is going to say or what they're going to do based on the audience's reaction of the thing behind them. Anyway, that also is kind of maybe something fun could be done with something like that too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to have to think on that one more because that could be really fun to incorporate as like a novel review or something. That could be really funny.
All right, so the next one that you have, I think, is what Google Slides.
And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Google Slides because we talked about that a good bit in the interview. And Kasey has these. I've got a link on here in our show notes. The Google Slides Can Do What episode of the Google Teacher Tribe podcast. 10 plus things you didn't know about Google that Google Slides could do on her Shake Up Learning website. So I'm not going to say a whole lot other than to say that Google Slides is my best friend. I love Google Slides. I use it for everything. I keep my units in Google Slides so that I have, I label them, I title them the week that it is, and I have all my learning targets in there. I have my instructions. I have, any kind of presentation that I've created for the week, and everything just goes in that Google Slide for the week. And so everything is right there together. So that's kind of the way that I plan my lessons, is in a Google Slide. And so that's, what I would like to share there. But also she mentioned stop motion, which is why I kind of threw that at Cade and said, let's come up with a really awesome way to use stop motion meaningfully in the ELA classroom. So I challenged him to do that. And so good luck with this, Cade.
Oh, man. So not a whole lot of specific application here other than just to simply try to define what we mean by stop motion. I mentioned this to students the other day who were creating a project for my Tragedy of Julius Caesar unit in my 10th grade classroom, and some of them responded, wow, that's a great idea. I hadn't even thought about that. And it's so common sense that many of us know that you can time your transitions and you can time how long a slide appears on the screen, that we don't even realize. We think about that as, maybe for creating a video, it's going to be up on the screen for X amount of time. Or we have a planned memorized speech where we don't want to be clicking the clicker to go to the next slide, and it's just going to go ahead and self-pace because we only have 20 minutes for this time frame to give a presentation and whatever. But really how this works is you time each slide for like 0.3 second or 0.5 second, or probably more like a 0.25, 0.3, and you time each slide and compile, 50 to 100 to 200 more slides, however long you want this stop animation to be. Of course, something very long would be would need a ton of slides. But how cool is it that you can create an animation just like the old school animations might have been done with pieces of paper, and you flip through that little flip pad and flip animation. So stop animation is the same way, where you can track movement on the screen from one slide to the next incrementally, and that builds up to something. This was difficult for me to think, okay, this you have to really have your ducks in a row as a teacher to be able to use this in the English classroom, because your students are going to take a long time with this.
Oh yeah, they are.
And for what value? For what benefit? And so I'm kind of at the point where, at this point, I think I'm going to discourage students to use it, or I'm not going to say, okay, guys, do you have your stop animation assignment done yet? But it is something where if my students have choice and they really, really love animation and they want to dig in and just spend endless hours working on something, I say endless hours. Some of them might be so good that it wouldn't take that long. It would maybe me at this point to get started with it. But all right, so I'll give you an example. Students recently with video game creation based on our project. Some of them said, I want to do Mario Kart. Mario Kart's awesome. I love Mario Kart. So they did a Tragedy of Julius Caesar version of Mario Kart. and they acted it out in class, the ones who did this. They acted it out. They had cardboard boxes they cut out to be cars, and it was interesting to say the least. But we were definitely demonstrating the capacity of a makerspace, maybe. But I thought in my head, it was at that point that I remembered some examples of stop motion that I had seen where this is perfect. Cars going around a track, around and around and around, that they could easily have created some kind of stop motion Julius Caesar scene, whether that's the scene that takes, or act maybe, whether that's Act 2 that takes you from the night of the agreement to conspire against Caesar and into the next day, tracking the path of the conspirators. Or maybe it's as Caesar approaches the Senate building, and he has a couple of warnings that he passes, one, the soothsayer, and two, the guy with the letter that he's like, no, I've got a letter that shows all the conspirators. And he's like, whatever, dude, you are one crazy man. I'm going into this meeting because I am an awesome, tragic hero. So anyway, I'm just thinking, tracking the path, that's kind of fun. And the Mario Kart thing is fitting because when I think of stop motion, I think of easily animating something from one slide to the next, not really racking my brain too far because I'm not an expert on it, but showing a path of a vehicle going around and around, and then various things that the vehicle might come across, or whatever types of plot elements or thematic elements you want to integrate into that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it should be offered as a choice as well, not a requirement, just because some students might really take to it a little faster than others, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the last tool that we're going to share with y'all is HopperDoc, and that is something, HopperDocs, and that's something that Kasey mentioned as well. She referred to a HopperDoc that she has highlighted on her blog, and we have a link to that in the show notes. I went to that HopperDoc, and she is correct. It is amazing. It is absolutely phenomenal. But guys, it is 97 slides, and I think that not a single one of us at the beginning of using HopperDocs is going to create one that is 97 slides, and that is okay. Okay, so if you want to go look at their 97-slide HopperDoc, it is amazing.
Who had a 97-slide HopperDoc?
You just put me on the spot. It was the one that she highlighted on her blog.
Yeah. Okay,
anyway,
wait. Was it Kasey that created it, or
no,
somebody
Kasey
else?
didn't create it.
Oh, man.
No, it was.
I was going to pick. She said something about my wordiness, and I was going to get on her.
You were going to get her for her lots and lots of slides.
Slidiness, but
okay.
Well, whatever.
Sorry, you missed that opportunity. That was not her. But she did talk a lot about that, and she has a blog on her on shakeuplearning.com that talks about that particular HopperDoc that is absolutely amazing.
You have had at least one or two this year that you used that I thought was pretty amazing.
Well, thank you. So on our blog, I try to walk you through step by step of how to create a HopperDoc. I think the one that I have here is only maybe 8 slides that you would have to create, 8 different things. But basically, the purpose of a Hopper Doc is not just to have a document that has links in it. As cool as that is, to be able to link to something else and have kids go there, that's not really what a Hopper Doc is. And Hopper Doc, you can go to the Hopper Doc Girls website as well. We've got that listed there. And they'll talk about the pedagogy behind it. But basically, it's going to have everything in it that you need. It's going to have collaboration, possibly. It's going to have creation. It's going to have assessment. It's going to have a time where they might reflect. So you're going to not just have a bunch of links to go to other websites. This is not a web quest. A Hopper Doc is basically a unit all in this one-stop shop. And I say one-stop shop, but it's going to lead them all over the place. So if you go to our blog, you can see where I've kind of talked through how you might plan a Hopper Doc. Cade walked in the other day and saw where I had drawn on the board because that's kind of how I plan. So I drew out the Hopper Doc plan on my board. I started out with, okay, I want to do poetry, and then I would draw an arrow to where I would want this slide to go, and then where I would want them to go next, and what I would need on each slide. I would need an assessment here. I would need to create a Google form for this. I would need to make sure this YouTube video link is working for this. So you can go to our website and see where I have talked you through how to plan something a little simpler than a 97-slide Hopper Doc to get you started.
All right, we'll go ahead and close out our show for today. I want to definitely thank Kasey Bell for being with us. That was fun, or not with us, with Michelle and Lauren Pfeiffer. But it's been a fun episode, learning about some tech tools, and hopefully we've shared some things that you guys might benefit from.
And guys, we're going to go take a few days off and come back and have another interview next week with somebody, and then have another episode for y'all.
See how many episodes we can get in before we finish out our first season. And looking forward to this summer where we get to work on some podcasting a little bit more. So thanks for hanging with us. And until next time, we'll see you.
See you later.
Thanks so much for listening to Episode 12 Tech Talk. Don't forget to stop by acrossthehallpodcast.com for the show notes and join the Across the Hall conversation at #XTheHall. We hope you'll join us next time when we talk to Joy Kerr, the author of Shift This, and she's also known for Genius Hour. We'll see you next time.